Here's a very fast run through of an entire day's work. So I don't want to necessarily be giving you the A to Z, and in actual fact, the animation I've done is relatively complicated. So I just want you to get a sense of what I've been doing. If you do want to learn more about how I've done this, you can visit my website at this address and go through a much longer run through of how I put the thing together. But the main point about prototyping, before we get into that, is just getting the overall action working. What that involves is stuff like moving, rotating, scaling, and duplicating the pieces around the set. It's animating the pieces to move over time. Now you've got 450 frames along the bottom there, along the timeline, in which to tell your story. And if you calculate that through, 450 frames is basically played at 30 frames a second, which is American television, and that equates to 15 overall seconds. So you've got 15 seconds to do this. The key part of my film was keyframing the visibility of objects. So for example, the numbers that scroll along the top, I've got lots of duplicates of numbers and I'm sliding them all along together, but I'm just specifying which bits you see at certain points in the film, which is part of the visibility. In my case, I'm also cycling animation so that I can reuse one main piece of animation. And it's stuff that we learnt way back when we were working on things like Walking with Dinosaurs, which was that if you make an animal do certain repetitive moves and then it gets back to its original position, you can loop it, you can cycle it, and it means that you can reuse the same creature but offset in terms of time. So if you take a performance, copy it, move it next to the original and offset the time, then it looks like a different creature even though it's doing the same type of movement. This is the key to my whole film, and I've done this throughout, and I've copied all of the fish movements that you see is all based on one, I think, reasonably well animated initial fish. So duplicating this fish all around gives this amazing movement, and it makes it look like it's full, like it's an underwater paradise. The next thing is to assign different colors. So I've set out some key colors for you to be using, and you can change those colors no problem. And there's a section called a hypershade, and if you open the hypershade you can see where the colors are listed. So choose your own color palette, come up with a color that's going to suit the film. There's an example on my website of other things that you could try to do, one including a bee film. So with the bees you might want a yellow and a black, of course, but you might also want some greens for the blades of grass. So it's not fixed in stone. Change things to suit your film. Another thing that I'm doing is moving the camera around, and I'm keyframing the camera. So keyframing is essentially the way we animate things, and I'm giving the camera 3 keyframes, one at the beginning of the film, one at the end, and one in the middle. And what this does is it mimics a camera physically moving around the environment. There are 2 different cameras at your disposal. It's the render camera, and it says it at the bottom of each of the screens. It's the render camera and the perspective. Render camera is what your audience sees. The perspective camera is you freely moving around the space whilst you're moving the props around. So imagine the render camera as being the actual camera on a film set. You wouldn't go and grab that and start moving it around. But if you want to move around the environment, you do want to have that freedom, so use the perspective camera to do that.